Relena Peacecraft loved to dance. She attended many balls, many social gatherings, many high-class affairs. The problem was, she only knew one dance, the dance of death. Hey there, if you enjoyed that opening and like my content in general, please consider giving my channel the old like and subscribe. I appreciate it a lot, and it lets me know that I'm going in the right directions. Reginald here. This is a themed build guide, something a little bit more fun and fluffy than necessarily the best possible build. My objective with this build was to create a Death Cult assassin that aligned with some of the lore for Death Cult assassins, including a focus on sniper weapons, the usage of excellent melee combat, especially in terms of dodging, and being a little bit squishier. So I've built this build around the idea that you're going to be squishy, you're going to use your ranged weapon a bit more, and you're going to be, kind of real focused on assassination techniques. So it's finessey, it's flexible, but it's a lot of fun, I think, even though it's not the most powerful build I put together. I think if you play it well, you'll get a lot out of it, and if you play it poorly, you'll die a lot. So I think that's fun, and I hope you enjoy it. Build name: Reginald's Demure Deadly Dancer. Intended role: finesse-based, multi-purpose damage dealer with a focus on specialist sniping, elite sniping, and shooter work, as well as melee, backstabs, and horde clear in melee. Weaponry: Turtulski MK9 Heavy Sword, Vrax MK7 Headhunter Autogun. Blessings: for the Turtulski, I'll be using Rampage and Headtaker to maximize damage against hordes and general usage. This thing still hits pretty hard, so that's nice. For perks, you'd probably want to take Unyielding and Flak, but I am not certain about that. Maniac seems like maybe a good choice as well. It does do quite decent unyielding damage if you can get a backstab headshot on a target. I've seen some pretty large numbers with the stealth, so the Maniac damage is quite good for the heavy 1 overhead, which can be changed to from special, so look into that as your primary muty sniping tool. For the Vrax Mark 7 Headhunter Autogun, I believe that Flak is pretty good, actually. Feels nice to use, and Unarmored happened to be what I locked in, and it also feels really great. I can get pretty solid body shots on Dregs and Flak at good ranges, and headshots are quite solid in all cases as well. For Blessings, I am running Headhunter and Opening Salvo. I've chosen Opening Salvo because I don't have a wide blessing pool for the Vrax. I've heard you should go with the other critical blessing, which is surgical or things like that. I will say that the Opening Salvo blessing is actually quite strong. It feels good to use, and it gives me extra range considering I don't have any other advantages for long range shots. The first shot in the salvo is very easy to access and reset that charge on. You basically just wait like a split second for your aim to reset. Your next shot will have that 20% extra power. That feels pretty good. It makes me feel like I'm working as a marksman, and I rather like that. A measured rate of fire on this gun can click a lot of heads. It feels like shooting the MG12, but, louder. Don't worry about my curios so much. They're probably bad choices. I don't have good ones on my Death Cult Assassin yet, so I would recommend picking whatever feels good for you. I always like to run at least one stamina curio. I probably would run health and something other than wounds, if I had to guess. Key nodes. We're going to be picking up Blades of Faith, Good Balance, Loner, Shroudfield, and Perfectionist, as well as the Inexorable Judgment Keystone, and both Pious Cutthroat and Invocation of Death. A specific call out here is that I am not running Until Death, and I did that with this build on purpose. 1, I wanted to explore it. 2, I really thought that playing a Death Cult Assassin without this would feel extra dangerous, and that seemed like a fun idea to me. Swing patterns for melee. Alright, so we're going to be using the heavy sword for this one, though you can use the Catechin sword as well. I think that's a lot of fun. The 3 patterns you need to know for this heavy sword are the special attack repeating. That's best used against mauler bodies and carapace heads in the case of crushers. The overhead special combo. The overhead does a lot of damage to Flak and Unarmored, and the special less so, but the special will do more damage to Flak body, so just keep that in mind. Then you'll want your horde clear combo, which is just going to be light 1 into heavy 1, light 1, heavy 1, light 1, heavy 1. Alternatively, you can do light 1 to start it off, heavy 1, heavy 2, heavy 1, heavy 2, heavy 1. That works quite well for most situations. The push attack is a thrust, which is handy. That's really all you need. The key thing to remember is from your heavy chain, you'll never get back to that overhead. So if you need it, do a special attack, overhead. Let's get into a brief discussion on this build. This build is a lot of fun to play. I've had good missions with it. I've certainly cleared Orc Maelstrom missions as well. However, it is not my strongest build. It is a little squishy, and it has some damage output issues in some missions. If you aren't fairly aggressive with it, you're going to find yourself not getting a lot of value out of your heavy sword, and there is sort of a weird juxtaposition here where you kind of enjoy standing back, popping heads with the headhunter, and then you realize you're, as a zealot, not really at the front line. You can't use Chastise to get there, and Shroud Field is set to Perfectionist, so you're going to kind of not want to be using that to rush ahead. In this sense, the movement speed is certainly helpful, as you're able to get to the front when you need to, but I did find myself lagging behind a little bit playing Sniper. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a lot of fun to do as the Zealot, especially with Shroud Field able to bail you out at any time, and allow you to maneuver and to get those free kills if you need them. So the idea here is that you can pair this with either a Catechin sword or a heavy sword. I wanted to use a weapon that had a sword, but wasn't a chain weapon. I wanted the feeling of a finesse-based assassin using bladed weapons. If there was a power sword for the Zealot, I would probably be using that. But suffice it to say, we want a professional, skilled fighter, but not necessarily using something loud. I realize that the Headhunter autogun is loud, but that serves the role of sniper, so it's a different context. One of the problems that this build has is that it has low maniac damage output if you don't have the right melee weapon, because the Vrax really doesn't do well against maniacs. It's not bad against unyielding, it's certainly not bad against most other shooter targets, but it really suffers when fighting maniacs, so you need something for that. That's actually the reason why I chose to go with knives as my blitz here. I'm quite partial to other options, but the knives really pick up the gap for different targets that the Vrax is bad at range, like specifically trappers, but also flamers and things like that. In this sense, the overhead 1 on the heavy sword really solves for maniacs in a way that you can't get out of the rest of your kit, and I didn't find very effective with the Catechin. I'm not saying the Catechin is bad, I actually really liked it too, but the heavy sword just gives me more reliable flexibility into the gaps that this build has with the weapon choices that I've selected. However, the heavy sword doesn't have much in the way of crits, and it's not going to be getting any kind of crit chance advantage out of Scourge, really. So you might want to take Invocation of Death's points and move it somewhere else. In fact, that whole section you could move somewhere else, though the movement speed really does help this build move around a little bit, so that's kind of why I stuck with it despite that. There is a way to make this work though a little bit. You can be a little less cagey with Shroud Field, and that will get you 100% critical chance. You can use that into a horde to proc a number of Scourge stacks on multiple targets, and that can improve your overall crit chance. Still, it's never going to be the same as using a crit weapon, so if you prefer to run something crit-oriented for this, the Catechin sword, the tactical axe, or even the chainsword are all good options. I just really wanted a sword, I wanted that feeling in this build, and I found that it works well enough. Maybe it could be tweaked, but I'm satisfied with how the build plays. I have taken this build into monstrous specials and all sorts of orc missions, and it plays just fine. It's a little squishy, so you need to keep that in mind. You can't be quite as aggressive, but that's okay because you've got the Vrax to engage in some standoff warfare from time to time. What I would say about this build is it's very thematic, and that's what it's going for. You're going to feel like a Death Cult Assassin. You're not going to feel like a Lunatic Zealot rushing to the front. You're going to be picking your fights. You're going to be hitting those knives. You're going to be sniping heads, and then when the fight gets messy, you're going to pull out your sword and do the dance of death. In that sense, this build is dynamic to play and it has a lot of different roles that you can take in a position. It's flexible and can fill in where your team is lacking, but it's not really excelling in any one domain. Most of my other Zealot builds are really good in melee and just don't do much shooting, maybe a little sniping with the revolver for specialist kills. This build is a little bit more patient, and I'm not saying that's bad, it's an interesting way to play Zealot, but it's also not maybe the way I like to play Zealot. I'll continue to work on Death Cult Assassin builds to see if I can find something that suits my personality and playstyle a little better. This is, again, a little bit more standoffish than other builds, but it is really fun to play, and I've taken it through monstrous maelstroms with no problems. It's not super squishy, but it is squishier than other builds, so if you're not used to a build like this, don't think of it as a Zealot, think of it as a veteran for a minute, like a melee veteran, but like a veteran that's a little bit better at shooting, it's a little squishy in melee, until you get used to it, and then you'll find how to make it work. That's my advice to you. And I would also recommend, this is a bit more of an advanced build. I wouldn't jump into this if you're new to Damnation. I would consider holding off a little bit, but if you really like it, like, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. I hope you have a fun time. With that, let's just hop into a brief demo. I'll show you some gameplay, about a minute and a half, and then we'll come back for a quick outro. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly like to make these build guides and play with things. I certainly themed this one and it was fun to make and enjoy. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and evening. Thank you so much for visiting, everybody. And remember, the dance of death is an endless waltz.